Putin is losing in Ukraine, so now he's turning to the Arctic. Russia has always been obsessed with the region, chasing its resources and strategic power for centuries. But now Putin's Arctic ambitions are bigger than ever. With Ukraine slipping out of his control, he's pouring billions into icebreakers, military bases, and infrastructure to dominate the north. Why? Because the Arctic is a jackpot. Trillions in resources and new shipping routes that could change everything. But the US, NATO, and other Arctic nations are ready to push back. Is the Arctic about to become the next major conflict? Let's break it down. Over the years, Putin has made multiple visits to the Arctic, each trip showcasing just how deeply rooted his obsession truly is. But these visits weren't casual stops or just photo ops. They were calculated moves, part of a bigger plan. Take 2010 as an example, when Putin hugged a polar bear, declaring it the real master of the Arctic. The Kremlin insisted this stunt was about conservation. However, reports revealed that the bear Putin was hugging had been sedated, fed expired sausages, and prepped for the stunt days in advance. So much for wildlife conservation. Critics saw this scene for what it was, a publicity grab in service of Russia's Arctic ambitions. In 2017, these ambitions took center stage once again. Putin traveled to Franz Josef Land, a Russian archipelago in the Arctic Ocean, to once again reaffirm his determination to control the region. Flanked by the defense minister and prime minister at the time, Sergei Shoigu and Dmitry Medvedev, he surveyed the landscape of snow, abandoned debris, and military installations, painting the Arctic as crucial for Russia's interests. This was also made abundantly clear a decade prior, in 2007, when Russian explorers planted a rust-proof Russian flag on the Arctic seabed, a move dismissed as an imperial stunt by other Arctic nations. But Russia isn't just spouting empty words, planting flags and posing for photos. No, there's a serious, well-crafted policy behind these seemingly surface-level theatrics. And this policy aims to build a long-term economic and geopolitical framework that ensures Russia's dominance over the Arctic. To this end, Russia submitted a revised request to the United Nations, laying claim to over 463,000 square miles of the Arctic seabed. This ambitious bid sought to extend Russia's territorial reach over the continental shelf, more than 400 miles from the shore. Believe it or not, the UN Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf actually approved most of this ambitious claim in early 2023. However, the final decision still hangs in the balance, with Denmark and Canada also presenting competing claims that overlap with Russia's, particularly along the Lomonosov Ridge. If approved, this request will only add to Russia's already vast territory in the Arctic. With approximately 1/5 of its landmass north of the Arctic Circle, Russia holds the largest share of Arctic territory. The country also stretches across 53% of the Arctic Ocean coastline, which equates to over 15,000 miles. The Russian Ministry of Economic Development has identified 9 Arctic support zones along this coast. These zones span from Kola in the west to Chukotka in the east and include major infrastructure projects like the construction of the Belkomor Railway in Arkhangelsk and the reconstruction of the Tiksi seaport in North Yakutia. But Russia doesn't only dominate the Arctic in terms of its territory, it also has the largest population living in the region. Roughly 2.5 million Russians live in the Arctic, which is home to 4 million people in total. That's over 60%. This number also includes 40 indigenous peoples, with some of the largest being the Dolgan, the Naganasan, and the Nenets. From these figures alone, it's clear that Russia's presence in the Arctic isn't just another case of opportunistic expansion. This time, Russia is actually deeply intertwined with the cultural and social fabric of the region. But protecting its people in the Arctic is far from Russia's main priority. This brings us to the most important question for this video. Why does Putin want the Arctic so badly? There's more than one answer to this question. In reality, several factors are driving Russia's Arctic policy. Let's break them all down. Remember when we said the earliest ventures into the Arctic were motivated by the region's vast, untapped resources? Well, nothing has changed. The Arctic is still very much a treasure trove of resources: oil, gas, minerals. The region is a bonanza waiting to be tapped. It's estimated that the region holds between $1.5 trillion and $2 trillion worth of mineral reserves. That's right, trillion. That's a lot of wealth buried beneath the ice. Among these resources are vast deposits of nickel, platinum, palladium, and rare earth metals, all of which are vital to modern industry. Another thing that's buried beneath the Arctic Ocean is about 16% of the world's untapped oil and a whopping 30% of its undiscovered gas. These reserves are critical at a time when global energy demand is rising and traditional fossil fuel sources are running low. The importance of these resources has only grown as geopolitical tensions increase, so it makes sense that Russia is keen to ensure that it has control over this potential gold mine. especially when oil and gas account for as much as 60% of Russia's export revenues and upward of 30% of its federal budget. Therefore, it shouldn't be surprising that Russia has already begun making moves to capitalize on these resources. A prime example of this is the Yamal Peninsula project, located roughly 370 miles north of the Arctic Circle. There, a gigantic industrial gas plant has been constructed on stilts over the frozen ground. The plant, part of the larger $27 billion Yamal LNG liquefied natural gas project, is designed to exploit the vast natural reserves in the region and export liquefied gas to global markets. Despite the harsh conditions, the temperature can plunge to -40 degrees Fahrenheit in the winter and the region is shrouded in darkness for months at a time, the project has been a resounding success for Russia. It's even attracted global attention, including foreign investors. The French energy giant Total has a 20% stake in Yamal LNG, even though international pressure on companies to withdraw from Russia following the war in Ukraine has increased. And Total isn't the only foreign company involved, which goes to show that the reserves believed to be located in the Russian Arctic are simply too significant to ignore. Plus, there's also another crucial factor that's been intensifying the competition in the Arctic lately. You see, Russia's renewed obsession with the Arctic isn't just a byproduct of its failures in Ukraine. It also has to do with climate change. As the Arctic is rapidly transforming, Russia is positioning itself to dominate these changes. The region's once impassable sea ice is melting at an accelerating rate. In just 40 years, the Arctic has lost 40% of its sea ice cover. This dramatic shift is opening up access to the vast and previously unreachable resources in the region. Experts predict that by 2035, the Arctic could be completely ice-free during the winter months, opening up new navigation routes and mining possibilities that were once too dangerous or costly to exploit. While this is a matter of huge environmental concern, for Russia, it's a golden opportunity. Russia's economic stakes in the Arctic go far beyond oil and gas. The country is also seeking to expand its fishing industry in the Arctic, which already accounts for 1/3 of the nation's total fish exports. The Russian government has set a goal to increase this share by 2030, and the melting Arctic caps are certainly helping. Then there's also the massive economic interest in exploiting the newly viable shipping routes. Thanks to climate change, a crucial Arctic maritime route that links Asia to Europe, the Northeast Passage, is rapidly gaining attention. With no ice in the way, the travel time between these two continents can be cut by half. This makes the Northeast Passage more than a simple shortcut. It's another goldmine for Russia. The Northeastern Sea Route, a vital part of this passage, stretches from the Barents Sea to the Bering Strait. Without sugarcoating anything, this lane is the future of global commerce. It cuts through some of the richest resources in the world, and it slashes their transport time in half. This means the goods can now move faster, cheaper, and with much less risk. These changes would have a mind-blowing impact on the volume of goods being transported using this route. Consider this. At the moment, the Northern Sea Route handles about 1.5 million tons of goods annually, but by 2030, this number will soar to 70 million. A shipment from Rotterdam, Netherlands to Shanghai, China used to take weeks using the Suez Canal. Now with the Northeast Passage, it can be slashed by thousands of miles, and no pirates or choke points. This unprecedented efficiency translates to fuel savings, faster deliveries, and more control. And once the ice clears enough, the Arctic shipping won't just be seasonal, it will be year-round. So it's no wonder Russia wants to fully harness this route. But until this happens, the Arctic countries still have to rely on icebreakers to navigate these challenging waters. That's why Russia has been expanding its fleet of these vessels, looking to operate up to 50 of these giants. The country already has 25 in service, dwarfing the fleets of every other nation. Compare that to the US, which has just 2 operational polar icebreakers. This gap gives Russia a clear edge in controlling the Northern Sea Route, and Russia isn't stopping. 6 more icebreakers are planned, along with a staggering $33 billion for a year-round Arctic port. This isn't just an arms race, it's an infrastructure race too. But don't think it's all smooth sailing for Russia in the Arctic. The country's infrastructure is still catching up. Even the icebreakers Russia uses need serious upgrades. Alongside the ports and navigational systems, the entire eastern part of Russia is underdeveloped, which only complicates things. However, resolving these issues is also only a matter of time. After all, the Russian government has started investing in the region heavily. The stakes are high, but Putin's vision is clear. With the right moves, Russia could become the gatekeeper of the Arctic, a position of immense power. With this in mind, let's see which moves Putin is making to secure this desirable scenario. What's in Russia's toolbox for the Arctic? First, Russia plays the legal game. The country is a signatory to the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS for short. Under UNCLOS, Russia claims a vast seabed as part of its exclusive economic zone. This claim is based on geological links to its continental shelf, and as you already heard, Moscow has been quite persistent in submitting these claims, despite being challenged by the likes of Canada and Denmark. Next up is propaganda. As you've also heard, Russia has been running a long Arctic PR campaign with a single aim: to control the narrative. To this end, high-profile visits by officials to the Arctic installations are quite common. Add glitzy forums like the International Arctic Forum, sometimes held on nuclear icebreakers, and you get the picture. Companies like Rosneft and Gazprom back these events to keep the spotlight on Russia's Arctic vision. Now let's talk money. Russia is heavily investing in the Arctic, despite economic instability. In 2019, it offered $41 billion in tax incentives for Rosneft's Vostok oil field, which could yield 2 million barrels a day. This initiative was largely driven by Rosneft's CEO, Igor Sechin, a close ally of Vladimir Putin, who had been advocating for a massive multi-trillion ruble tax break package since mid-2019. Another $300 billion has been allocated for Arctic infrastructure, LNG projects and more. Ports, airports and towns are in the pipeline. All these efforts aim to stop people from leaving the region, thus consolidating Russia's power. That's quite a bold bet on Arctic potential. But it's a bet Putin's willing to stand fully behind. After all, his hold on power depends on it. After everything he's put his country through in Ukraine, he needs a major win, and he needs it quickly. That's why Russia has also been using hard power to dominate the Arctic. The Northern Fleet, its Arctic force, is at the heart of this effort. And let us tell you, this fleet is massive. As many as 2/3 of Russia's naval power calls this fleet home. We're talking 80 operational ships, including 25 submarines, 6 missile cruisers, and the mighty nuclear-powered flagship Peterveliki. And that's just the beginning. Since 2014, Russia has built or modernized over 475 military facilities across its northern border. It's reopened at least 50 Soviet-era bases and constructed 4 new ones. One of the most striking is the Northern Clover Base, located on Kotelny Island. Painted in Russia's national colors, this base can house 250 soldiers and boasts state-of-the-art technology. It's nothing short of a fortress in the Arctic, built to send a clear message: the Kremlin intends to own the North. Of course, this military buildup is no coincidence. Russia sees the Arctic as its future battleground. It seems that Putin is getting tired of his current ones. That's why losing control over this region is unthinkable for the Russian president. This probably explains why the Kola Peninsula alone hosts 7 of Russia's 12 ballistic missile submarines, which operate as a nuclear second strike force. These submarines are crucial for Moscow's deterrence strategy. The Northern Fleet also runs regular patrols and exercises in the region to remain vigilant at all times. Russian submarines roam Arctic waters and warships stage mock battles. Even long-range bombers are part of the show, flying provocative missions near NATO airspace. Speaking of flying, air power is another key piece of Moscow's strategy in the Arctic. Russia has revamped airstrips across the region, from the Kola Peninsula to Franz Josef Land. The Nagoskoye Air Base, its northernmost outpost, is now bristling with MiG-31 fighter jets and advanced missile systems. The Bastion missile system stationed there can reportedly target ships up to 186 miles away. Anti-aircraft batteries, radar stations, and drone bases complete the picture. These are dual-use facilities designed for both civilian and military purposes, but their potential for offensive operations certainly takes precedence. Why such a massive military investment? Well, it's simple really. Russia wants to deny NATO access to the Arctic. That's why it's actively installing anti-access area denial systems to keep adversaries out. As former US Second Fleet Commander Vice Admiral Dan Dyer puts it, Russia will protect the Arctic waters by all means. But here's the catch. It becomes quite difficult to throw these means around when your economy has practically been shattered by the war in Ukraine. Building and maintaining the level of dominance Russia aims for is a heavy burden, and as Ukraine has shown by targeting some Russian bases in the Arctic, the country is far from invincible in the region. That's why Putin is also securing a more discreet Russian presence in the Arctic. Besides the in-your-face military installations, Russia has quietly anchored itself in strategic Arctic enclaves. The 2 prime examples are Barentsburg and Pyramiden, Russian settlements right on Norwegian soil in the Svalbard archipelago. Those aren't flashy outposts, they're relics from another time, tied to a 1920 treaty allowing resource exploitation in the region. But make no mistake, they're vital chess pieces in Moscow's Arctic strategy. Barentsburg, with its 400 inhabitants, feels like a slice of Russia dropped onto a glacier. Built in the 1930s to support a coal mine, the settlement clings to its Russian identity to this day. From an Orthodox church to Lenin's bust in the town square, every corner whispers loyalty to the motherland. The coal mine still operates, employing 130 miners in dangerous conditions, but profitability here is a joke. The coal can barely heat the town itself. However, the mine's true value is strategic. Without it, Russia risks losing this toehold in NATO territory. How so? Well, Russia needs economic activity to keep the land, so coal mining continues even at a loss. And just to make sure, Moscow also built a shiny new consulate here, complete with a marble staircase and bunker-like walls. It's designed to make a statement: we're here to stay. Just 3.5 hours away lies Pyramiden, a ghost town that once housed 1,000 Soviet-era residents. Abandoned in 1998, the settlement now serves as a tourist attraction. Time stands still here. School books lie on desks, and propaganda films from the Soviet Union remain frozen in the local cinema. Russian guides lead curious visitors through this eerie Soviet time capsule. It's a curious mix. History lesson meets soft power projection. Before the war in Ukraine, 20,000 tourists visited Pyramiden annually, which kept the town alive. Now the number has decreased, but the Russian presence remains unshaken. These settlements may seem insignificant, but they give Russia a unique advantage. Their location in NATO's backyard makes them perfect for gathering intelligence or asserting territorial claims. Beyond settlements, Russia's Arctic research efforts also reveal its ambitions. For decades, Moscow has deployed drifting ice stations and research bases across the region. Since 1937, these stations have collected data on meteorology, marine life, and natural resources. But there's a deeper goal here: seizing the Lomonosov Ridge. Moscow argues that this ridge is an extension of the Russian continental shelf, aiming to control its vast underwater resources. Then there's also the Academic Lomonosov, a one-of-a-kind creation also named after academic Mikhail Lomonosov. The Academic Lomonosov is a floating nuclear power plant built to supply electricity to isolated Arctic areas and even gas rigs. This 460-foot-long and 98-foot-wide giant represents a bold engineering leap. One is painted in Russia's national colors, white, blue, and red. The plant's reactors generate enough electricity and heat for a city of 100,000. This figure far exceeds the 4,230 inhabitants living in Pevek, a remote Arctic town that the Academic Lomonosov primarily powers. It's mobile yet robust, capable of withstanding waves up to 23 feet high, winds of 124 miles per hour, and even a helicopter crash. Alexei Lakachev, the head of the state's nuclear corporation Rosatom, called it a unique construction the world has never before seen. A construction that blends a nuclear plant's power with a ship's mobility. Of course, safety concerns linger, with Greenpeace dubbing the Academic Lomonosov a floating Chernobyl. However, Rosatom insists its reactors are modern and sophisticated, thus meeting its highest safety criteria. The ship's engineers remain adamant that they have planned for absolutely everything. The ship traveled about 2,500 miles from Murmansk to Pevek on a grueling 4-month journey to secure its place as a symbol of Moscow's Arctic ambitions. Naturally, the Academic Lomonosov and the overall spike in Russian activity in the Arctic have raised all sorts of alarms in the West. It's clear that the Kremlin isn't hiding its Arctic ambitions, so what are the US and NATO doing about them? Well, they've also stepped into the Arctic spotlight. This can be traced back as far as 2018, when NATO launched Trident Juncture, its largest Arctic exercise in years, mobilizing 50,000 troops. However, once the invasion of Ukraine began, NATO doubled down. The 2022 Cold Response military exercise saw 30,000 troops from 27 countries in Norway training to fight in Arctic conditions. From amphibious US Marines to French warships slicing through icy fjords, the message to Moscow was clear: NATO is ready to push back. The US is also aware that it must act fast. Admiral Darrell Caudle of the US Fleet Forces described the Arctic as the first line of defense for homeland security. Yet gaps between the US and Russia are glaring. The US lacks sufficient icebreakers and has limited search and rescue capabilities. The July 2024 update to America's Arctic strategy was a decent start, but its execution will certainly take time. NATO lags too, without a comprehensive Arctic plan or enough cold weather-ready equipment. However, Finland and Sweden's entry into NATO was undoubtedly a game-changer. The alliance now surrounds the Arctic Circle. Within weeks of Finland joining in April 2023, NATO staged exercises under Article 5, its collective defense clause. A year later, Steadfast Defender brought the largest military maneuvers since the Cold War to northern Norway. NATO's presence in the Arctic is also a relief for small Arctic nations like Iceland. At the same time, Iceland has a lot to offer NATO in terms of air monitoring, thanks to the Keflavik Air Station, a vital hub for tracking Russian submarines. The more countries get involved in this brewing conflict, the higher the possibility of an all-out war starting in the Arctic. In fact, many experts believe that this is the only possible outcome of Russia's increased assertiveness in the region. They claim that the war in Ukraine might not have triggered World War III, but a war in the Arctic certainly will. And given how high tensions in the region are, any spark, whether a military misstep or a clash over territory, could be the cause for this war. But what do you think? Do you agree with this grim outcome? If not, how do you see the future of the Arctic? Is it headed toward a full Russian takeover or just a tense geopolitical standoff? Share your predictions in the comments below. Now go and check out Forget Ukraine, Russia's biggest problem exposed, or click this other video instead.